Okay. We're
So
good.
Bishop, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. My question for you is, how many weekends a year are you actually on the road around the diocese for purposes like this?
All the time is the answer. It's most often for visitations. Sometimes, though, I am on the road for something else. If we've got a big retreat going on, we've got about 66 congregations. I try to see at least half, if not more, during the year. But there are other things that happen, right? I have House of Bishops that I need to participate in. The bishops of the West also will probably get together in person as opposed to by Zoom. And so then there's some travel days for that. But I am out and about an enormous amount. Though I have to say, I am hoping that some of our simple meetings might stay on Zoom, because we've got folks who come from, and everyone's working this out, we've got folks who come from a long way. Napa is fairly close to the Sacramento metro area, so we've got a big bolus of population, but we've got a lot of great members who want to participate where it's 5 hours for one way. And so that's one of our blessings from Zoom, is we actually know how to do this. If we wish, we can do that. So I'm still going to be on the road most Sundays. If it's really super early, then I spend the night. You know, if I leave at 4 a.m., it's too long. So yes, so I'm on the road a lot. Thank you. Let's see, another question. Let's see if I've got one from our studio audience, or maybe you guys are the studio audience. Andy, you got one?
Hi, this is a simple question, but it's just, I just don't know about the diocese. What's the what diocese do we belong to here, and what's the geographical area? What does it encompass?
That's a really good question. So a diocese serves like a county in the wider church, and each county has got a diocese has a bishop. In fact, a bishop is sometimes called the diocesan. The reason I carry a staff here is because it indicates that I am in that position of responsibility. I'm the one in that role, which means that I never have to worry about traveling with my staff, because when I go to San Francisco, I'm in a different diocese and I'm a bishop, but I do not have the same authority over that particular area. So this diocese goes from essentially the Delta, from Benicia north to Oregon and Nevada. So Nevada and the Diocese of Northern California, we divide Lake Tahoe. There's an invisible diocesan line right down the middle, right where the state line is. So it is one of the largest ones. It's about the same size as the state of Arizona. And we have people who live throughout it, not just in the bottom. And so that's what makes it an unusual place. It's very beautiful. I have a map of the diocese that my husband put together for me. And it's a topographical. It's a road map, but you can see where all the mountains and valleys are. And it's now set up on the wall in the office. And it is 9 feet by 10 feet. And it's not as if it makes the print really big. It just shows the scale. So we got a lot of beautiful land. Thank you for asking. Other questions?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Michael Pratt. I think probably most, if not all, of the parishes in the diocese are concerned about attracting a younger demographic and expanding our congregations. And we have a natural constituency for that. It's school-age children. So I'm wondering what the diocese does to support Episcopal schools and child care centers throughout Northern California.
It's a great question. Thank you very much. It is wonderful when we have got childcare centers, daycare. To my knowledge, and one of you may be able to correct me, we have got just 2 of those institutions. One of them is St. Michael's Day School, which is in the greater Sacramento area in Carmichael, and it's a very fine K through 8 school. And I have the opportunity to show up on a regular basis. I got to be, before COVID, I got to go around and tell the St. Nicholas story. And we did it with all the vestments on, with a cope, with a hat, with a mitre, and a red velvet bag full of gold coins. And it worked better for the little kids. They liked that. The teenagers were slightly less interested, but that was fine. I still got to visit them. And so I show up as part of that. We have another preschool that's been around for a long time in Woodland, and they do a really good job of reaching out to the neighborhood, and particularly the working parents there. We do not have a lot of others who do that, though we do have folks who have who open up their doors for a variety of community groups. But you're right. Inviting in our families so we become multi-generational is a unique challenge. And one of the best ways to do that is to ask the question, and no one means to say this, but we sometimes think in our heads, how can I get whatever slice of person we're looking for? In fact, the real question is, how do we meet the needs of the families and children in our area? What is it they need? That's what you do. That's where we begin. Often very humbly. We throw there. I know of parishes who throw a vacation Bible school, not because they've got a lot of kids. They don't have any kids, but their neighborhood needs it, and so they do it. So there are a variety of ways to do it, and it's like a yeast in the dough. It's a slow growth. It's a slow growth. But you're right, everyone's keenly aware of that. Other comments or questions? All right, Malcolm, and then the gentleman behind you. Go ahead.
Tell us about raising up new ordained clergy in the diocese. What's happening with that?
Thank you. So Malcolm, Malcolm and I, of course, serve on the Commission on Ministry, who has that work to do. We have looked carefully at what's going on, and I think we've actually really strengthened our system. And it's grown on the wisdom of a lot of folks. Partly, I was interested in finding a way to train up deacons in a more local fashion, because distance, like that 9 by 10 foot map, distance is a big deal. But we need to be able to raise up folks across our diocese and across socioeconomic lines. So we are in the process of developing a relationship with the Seminary of the Southwest. They have a program called the Iona Collaborative. And essentially, they provide modules of education that many different dioceses, and now ours, can use to teach local folks. And we are doing this with the Diocese of El Camino Real. And one of the benefits that is going to bring us is that the Diocese of El Camino Real is translating the modules into Spanish. And that means that we will, it's all online. I think we're going to have some weekends, but it's not a drive down every week sort of class. So I'm feeling very good about that. And then the other thing we have done is we've worked really hard to start thinking about how to strengthen lay ministry. So now if someone says, I think God is calling me to do something, I'm not quite sure what it is. We have excellent groups called RDGs, right? Regional discernment groups. And they pray with an individual in your deanery region and will help get a sense, yes, God is moving, and yes, maybe it's for ordained ministry, Or it could be, yes, God is moving in your life. And we really see you as one of our lay preachers, as a lay catechist, as one of those folks who do healing prayer, as an evangelist. So there are a lot of ways that we are trying to strengthen ministry. And I really like how we've got a bunch of skilled people in sections all over the diocese, and they're meeting with folks right now. So I don't know. Since we are in this meeting all the time, was there any other piece that you were thinking of? Well, okay. Okay, but it's good work, and we've been working hard at it. Thank you. Another question.
Good morning.
There you are. It's Peter. That mask. Goodness gracious.
Bishop, with the General Convention coming soon in 2022, what are your aspirations or the diocese priorities for potential outcomes? What would you like to see the convention either raise up or resolve in terms of ministries?
Oh my gosh. Thank you. That is a great question. You know, General Convention accomplishes a number of goods every time we meet together. And our meeting was delayed, right? So usually we would have met our every 3 years summer meeting of, and I won't say the national church because we have dioceses in Taiwan, right? So we've got a big scope that are affiliated with the Episcopal Church. All of those groups meet together. And one of the things we do is we worship together, which is not unimportant. This is what the body of Christ does. The faithful people gather and offer prayers to God together, raising up the needs of their concerns. So that's one of the things that I know we will accomplish. Another thing that I am hoping we will accomplish is to be able to hear and move on the suggestions from our presiding bishop. He's been working very, very carefully on issues of racial reconciliation and racial reconciliation, evangelism, and care for creation. It's a beautiful trifecta, and his suggestions, his work, and his programs, I think, have been a blessing. As an example of that, I would suggest that people recall the work of Sacred Ground, right? Does everyone know what that is? Sacred Ground is a 10-part study session whereby folks gather together and hear more of our US and our world history than what you usually hear. And the bits that we usually do not hear, if you are a privileged white person like me, are how things did not work out fairly or appropriately for a person usually of brown skin of some sort, or a Native person. I think we know more these days about how neighborhoods actually had laws hidden in the administration. You can sell houses to all these people, but not these folks, right? We know that as redlining, and that has had a huge and devastating effect. So there are a lot of pieces. So in 10 sections, we have a chance to hear that. We use a lot of videos. There's a lot of important storytelling, and it is a kind of reckoning as we get a fuller picture of all of what's been going on. And people end up with, I think it's a very heartfelt process. A lot of folks do it. We've had many, many groups planted, and they carefully listen and talk together. It's neutral ground, it's safe ground. That's a great example of something that has arisen from our presiding bishop that is gradually healing and knitting us together. We will have an endless number of resolutions to consider. And it's hard for me to even estimate where to begin on those, to be perfectly honest. And this will be my first time as a bishop. I get to see how it works for the House of Bishops. That is rather new to me. I myself love the work of formation and discipleship, so I want to hear what that group is doing. So, a meandering question, yes.
I was delighted to hear you in your sermon talk about invite, welcome, connect, because I think a lot of us here at St. Mary's have found it both inspiring and actually practical, a way of helping us understand how we can be more effective. So I was just curious, as you go around the diocese, are there other churches engaged in this work, or what's your sense of it?
Thank you. So, I invited Mary Palmer to make a presentation on this version, Episcopal evangelism. How do you invite people? How do you make sure that when they arrive, they actually feel welcomed? And then how do we form a connection, a living connection, not just folks with us, but folks with our living God? And Mary Palmer did a great job in presenting that. And then, of course, COVID hit. So a lot of our churches did some good work. I would think of St. Patrick's in Glen Ellen, Kenwood. They had someone in about 6 months after that, what was that, the 2019 Diocesan Convention. And they did a great training session. I think for some folks, some of that energy kind of went onto a side burner because we were so busy trying to figure out just how to worship at all. But I will tell you that a lot of folks, I don't know, I think having heard that and working hard on their presentation of online worship, they've had growth like you, right? I know of a number of congregations where they have folks who, confirmation is the first time that someone's been in the sanctuary. So that it's been powerful. So I think we've just started to deploy it, and I hope that we will come around again and learn from each other, because that's one of the best things. How does it work for you in this area? That's fabulous to know. You guys have something to share with us because of your work on that, and it's pretty exciting. Another question. And I want to thank our deacon Don, who is trotting back and forth, making sure that everyone's got a microphone.
I just finished my first year of EFM, and at the end, one of the participants told me about a book that she was doing for, I think, seminary, called A New Testament. And I was wondering, with the added books to it and things like that, what's the Episcopal churches or the diocese church feelings about adding those 10 new books to the New Testament and that sort of thing?
So that's a great question. The church developed that canon of Scripture based on what we had received. Our Gospels, of course, had eyewitnesses. Even as they were sharing the Gospels, there were people around who could say, yes, we heard how that story went, and could corroborate that. And then that we have those letters from Paul. Other works are interesting culturally. I do not see their value in calling them canon, right? But there are other things about them that are interesting, give us a great deal about the history. A lot of the Gnostic work was written in the 2nd and 3rd century. It really gives us a window into what people were thinking about. How were they wrestling with these things? The church needed to verbalize our beliefs, and it took us a little while to be able to verbalize them in a way. How do I say this? If you use a particular phrase, after a group has used it or prayed into it for about 3 years, you find out where that trajectory of thinking takes you. It's not always where you expect. And that's why it took some time for us to be able to develop our creeds so that we could speak very clearly. So it's fascinating work, and I really appreciate your bringing it up.
Bishop, I have 2 questions for you.
Okay.
One is, what is your most favorite part of your ministry? And then the other side of the coin, what's your least favorite?
Oh, it's a good question. So my most favorite part is this. This is the best part, is when I get to be with you, one way or the other, hands down. It's hard to say which is better, giving you communion, reaffirming you, or ordaining folks. They're all like top peak experiences. I get to see the living God in your eyes, in your lives, in your stories, and in the community, in those moments. That's the best, by far. What's the hardest thing? There's just an awful lot of meetings. A surprising amount of meetings. If you've tried to get on my calendar, it is not because I'm stubborn. It's because I'm just jam-packed because there's just a lot of meetings and a lot of people, and I want to talk with everybody. So probably not so different from what you guys have.
Hi,
Hi.
thank you for coming. Is there a group of people that are trying to figure out what to do with a common cup during a pandemic? Because
Yes.
it's not easy.
It is not easy. I had a chance to gather together with some, epidemiologists and virologists before my last letter to you all about the recommendations, right? How do we protect the vulnerable? How do we function within the guidelines that we have, each of us, for our own county? And that's something that's tricky, is our Shasta County has got a very different demographic profile than where Petaluma is. So, how often do people come in contact with each other? How much health care is available? So one of my goals has been to set guidelines that function within good science, within health department guidelines, and within good pastoral functioning for parishes that live in any of those places. So that's why I try to make guidelines as opposed to just one narrow path. I think that we will probably get, and this is not my official pronouncement, but this is what my thinking is right now. Well, I have to say that. I think we'll probably get to the place where we are ready to engage the Common Cup as if we would at flu season. I think that's probably where we're going to get. So where there's a possible bug running around, that that's probably going to be the mental mindset. And the fact is, in those times, we have the Common Cup. There will be some folks who will not receive because they are not feeling well. No one has to receive from the cup because communion of one kind is complete communion. It always is. I anticipate we will come back to the Common Cup. But I think that the comfort level for that is not widely available yet. We long for that. It's a symbol of our unity, that single cup, right? That's why we do it with a single cup. So I'm sorry, I wish I had a more definitive answer. So the answer is we're working towards it. I hear from other bishops all the time and hear how they are working towards it. There are once monthly calls from the presiding bishop's staff where he has, the head of the NIH was on one time, telling us about kind of what is the best thinking, science and practice around some of these issues. When I get that, I pass it on. So I'm seeking from a lot of sources. Other questions? Does anyone want to know my favorite kind of pie to make? So I will tell you the story of blueberry pie in my family. You should know that I come from a family of pie bakers. My mother taught me how to make good pie crust. Her mother taught her how to make good pie crust. All my sisters do it, and now my daughter is getting really good. We like pie. So in one of the churches where I served, I like to make a blueberry pie that has got some fresh strawberries mixed in with the regular strawberries, fresh blueberries with the cooked blueberries in a pre-baked pan. So there was a fundraiser going on for the children's ministry at St. Philip's in the Hills in Tucson. And they did it you could create a lunch, right? This was sort of like, oh, I can't remember what the musical was, where you bid on some lady's lunch that's been prepared. Well, it was the fundraiser. And so for my lunch that I prepared, a picnic for whoever bid on it, and there were dozens of picnics provided, my picnic had the blueberry pie. So my husband wanted the blueberry pie. And so he started to bid on that picnic so he could get the blueberry pie. And he drove it up and up and up. And he eventually bought a blueberry pie for $50. At which point all the other husbands turned around to him and said, "What have you done? Now I have to also bid $50 on whatever my spouse put in for the picnic." Oh my gosh, it was a great year for the fundraiser. Actually, I like almost any kind of pie. Let me see.
And we know with your math that pie, no matter how many slices, we all still get the same amount.
That's right. That's right. It's funny how that works. Other comments or questions or queries?
How are your roses doing? I know you were rosarian.
Oh. So, I'm so glad you asked. I planted 2 bare root roses, and they are struggling because I haven't got a working irrigation system, so I have to remember to get out there. But they're okay, they're gonna make it, and I've actually gotten some roses, and I have had some potpourri on rose stems, right? When it's beautiful and then crisps into place. I, however, have got 4 tomato plants, and we've gotten at least 4 tomatoes off of them, and they were great. We had it for dinner the other night. So I fondly dream of having many more tomatoes and many more roses. We're just not there yet. Thank you for asking. Yes, Yolanda?
The symbolism of you know, what you wear. Is there any particular symbolism to your garments or to,
Yes.
do you wear a ring or
I do.
And is that symbolic as well?
It is. That's a really, really good question.
Mm-hmm.
So clergy in general in the Episcopal Church often wear a white garment like this. It's a robe. It's just over your street clothes, right? Whatever your shirt and trousers or skirt is, you just put this on top. And while it has sort of an antecedent back to what the, I don't know, liturgical churches were doing in the 1500s, the fact is one of the reasons we've retained it is so that there is a uniformity in our self-presentation when we are there. What that means is nobody, no matter how many Sundays you are on the altar, and that's not just the clergy who wear it, right? So acolytes also will wear a garb. No one is looking at, you know, oh gosh, I saw those pants last week and the week before. Really the only thing they can see are your shoes, and no one really worries about those anymore. But it really does, it does sort of free us up. So that I think that is one of the benefits of it. Clergy will wear a stole like this. I'm going to turn this over to our deacon in just a minute, but I will tell you that this stole, usually when it's got a cross on it. Here, we'll show the folks here. Clergy will usually symbolically welcome wearing it by putting a kiss on this. To signify that they are taking on the yoke of Christ, whose burden is easy. And so that's one of the things that we do. So we wear that as a sign of office. Now, if you go all the way back, it comes from the stola that Roman senators used to wear as a sign of office. So it goes all the way back to a non-church function. We, however, have retained it for that reason. Don, why don't you note what's different about how I wear my stole and how you wear your stole?
So typically a priest and a bishop wear their stole as Bishop Megan has hers displayed. If you notice, a deacon would wear a stole that goes across here. And that just symbolizes the orders of the deacon. It's a separate but equal order. Each order, the bishop, the priest, the deacon, we all have specific duties and ministries that we're called to, but in the eyes of the church, they're on equal ground. I am responsible to the bishop, but I also have my own responsibilities out in the world that I report to the bishop. And if there's something bishop needs, I would certainly respond to that. Where Rob and I work more in a collegial relationship, Robin has her specific duties, I have mine, and that's why we wear different stoles to show the difference in our particular ministries.
There are some other pieces that come along. So one of them is I've got a beautiful ring. Now, lots of times, and it's really hard for you to see it, so I'll just describe it to you verbally. Lots of times, this would be a signet ring, and the ring is a symbol of the bond, the relationship between bishop and diocese. Okay, so that's it's not the same as a wedding band, but it is a symbolic sign of commitment, responsibility, and unity. So we wear that. In my case, my hands are actually not big enough to have a signet ring that is correctly sized so that I could make a stamp with our actual shield on it. It would be like this big, and my hand is not that big. So instead, I carry that stamp, which I can use, but mine has some symbolic pieces. So there's an amethyst on it, and that, of course, is a purple colored stone, making us think about bishops, because that's a color affiliated with bishops. And on one side is something that's taken from our shield, and you could see on the, you know how a class ring has little things on the side part here. On that side is this little carved chalice, and then a host, right? So that's the sacraments. And of course, the sacraments are how Sacramento got its name, and that's our sea city. Oh yeah, yeah. It's a Spanish, right? It's the Spanish explorer. And then on the other side is a sign of the Trinity. And that's another powerful symbol of our life of faith. And so those things are here. And when I was consecrated, the ring was given to me and I placed it on my hand. So it was a special thing. Where is it? Oh, I've got a beautiful pectoral cross hidden. See if I can get it all the way out. It's not very elegant. The cross is elegant. This process is not. There we go. So this is a beautiful piece. You'll see that it's a cross. A lot of the crosses that we've used in this diocese have this Celtic, right? This sort of showing the whole circle of creation behind the cross itself. And this was presented to me from my family as a gift, heavily prayed over before it was given to me at the consecration. So yeah. And then the hat, the funny hat, does anyone know the shape of that funny hat? Do you know why it's shaped like that? No, no one knows. It's supposed to represent a flame of Pentecost. That's what it's supposed to do. It is a highly stylized flame of Pentecost and comes in different colors. It's good questions.
Did you want to talk about your crozier as well?
Oh, yes, my crozier. Well, and we did talk about that a little bit. So my staff, the crozier, is a sign of really a shepherd's crook. And that's a powerful symbol for me about how one practices this role. It is a shepherding role. It is a protective role. Oh, and here we go. Look at this. You have the best rector. Let's see if I can stand so the people online can see part of me. So this is beautiful, and this is something that my predecessor carried with him. This one can actually become shorter so that it can fit in a case and go in a car. But I will tell you that I have one that is all in one piece. Well, actually, there's two. So the cathedral has a very beautiful crozier that's antique, and in this shape here is a symbol of the shield of the diocese. And so you'll see it looks a little different, and it lives at the cathedral. It doesn't go on the road. It lives in the cathedral. It sometimes gets as far as the sidewalk, and that's it. Then it goes back into the cathedral, which is fine. This is my traveling crozier. But when I was elected, my husband had thought that maybe I might be chosen. We'd prayed about this a lot, so he knew that was a possibility, right? And so he made preparation for this by going over and finding a shepherd's crook for me. He went weeks in advance to the Tractor Supply store. And at the Tractor Supply store, they actually had all sorts of different crooks. And they were, there you go. They had ones that were rather small for small animals. The one I have at home is actually for sheep, and it's about this tall, and it's just made out of one piece of bent stripy wood. And he hid it next to his ties in the closet. That's why I didn't see it. But after Bishop Beisner called me to announce my election, shortly after that, he came with this crozier in hand and handed it to me as my very first crozier. And so it's a powerful symbol. It's an actual shepherd's crook that I have at home. Yeah, thank you for asking.
And it has a secondary use for opening doors, doesn't it?
It does have a secondary use. And in fact, that is true. If you were to go to the cathedral, you would see a few little dents in the door, because when a new bishop arrives, they wait outside the closed doors of the cathedral, lift up the bottom of that and wail away at least 3 times, so someone knows I'm knocking at the door. At which point it's opened up, and then the dean of the cathedral says, "Oh, Bishop, please come in." And then I come in, and then I'm seated in my cathedra. So this very fancy chair that you saw represents the teaching responsibility and authority of a bishop. It's called a cathedra. And I have one formal one. Everything else is reminiscent of that, and it lives in the cathedral. And so that's my cathedra, and that's why that church is called a cathedral, which is esoteric history, but really cool. Thank you. Yes?
Where is the cathedral?
That's a great question.
Where is the cathedral?
So the Sea City, you could call it that, is not San Francisco, even though that's the easiest route on the freeways here. In fact, it is Sacramento, and it's in sort of the old town part of Sacramento. If you've been to one of the Sutter campuses, you would have been near our cathedral. It's been there for a long time. Initially, all of Northern California, including the San Francisco region, was one big diocese. And Bishop Kipp came over. Can I tell you how he got here? I have to tell you. All right. And eventually, our section was split away, and then the Sacramento became the place where the cathedral was. Bishop Kipp in, where's our historian? What year was this? 1850, something like that. Bishop Kipp was selected to be a missionary bishop in our larger area. And this happened in New York. And shortly after he was selected, he had to sell everything in his house. I think he was relatively well off. And he and his family prepared to go to Northern California. And their goal was to land in San Francisco. The way you got to San Francisco was to get on a boat and travel down all along the southeast shore until finally you get to the Caribbean, and then you get around to where the Panama Canal now opens out, except it wasn't a canal at that time. It was a river. And so he tells in his annals, some of which I've read, how he got his family on this boat that chugged its way up the river until the river got too small, at which point you got on burros. And all your worldly goods also got on burros. And then you went through the jungles, and you got separated from your family, and you had to sleep in dreadful boarding houses where all the women were on one floor, all the men were on the bottom, and the food was horrible, and it was hot and sticky. And then you got on your burros again for like 3 or 4 more days, until finally you got to the bit that we think of as the Panama Canal. Once he'd gotten that far, he essentially could access the ocean trip up to San Francisco. So for our first bishop to get here, it was the adventure of a lifetime, and there was no return because, of course, there was not a railway connection. So San Francisco was probably his home base, and it took him a lot longer to make his rounds than it takes me. He got to Eureka, for instance, by boat. That's how he got there. It's a great question. I think we're probably almost at the end of our time, but is there one last comment or question or point of clarity? Wonderful, you guys understand everything. I'm so impressed. Andy, you too? Well done. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate this. It's totally fun. And I appreciate the time that you guys, many of you came early. And now you have stayed late. So blessings on all of you. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. Good to see you.